Hey, welcome back. So this week in this tutorial, we're going to go ahead and continue on with our landscape, and we're going to put in shrubs, grass, some little small rocks using the procedural process onto our grass layer. And then I'm also going to show you the foliage paint system and how that works as well. So if you missed out on the previous tutorials on this, you can go ahead and check it out here at Putting on the Fritz 3D Visualization and get caught up. I show how we got this far, how we made these different landscapes. Last week I showed you the water plug-in tool, and in the future I may do a different water process as well. So it just depends on how long these tutorials get. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at what we're going to do this week. All right, so right here in this scene, we can take a look and we see that we have some grass, some small shrubs. We have some larger rocks here that have been applied as well. And if I turn on our frames per second, you can see we're holding up pretty well. It really depends on the processing that's going on in your computer as well right now. So we're going to go ahead and do that. So let's go ahead and jump into our current level that we're going to work with. Okay, so here we have my basic aspen level. Right now we don't have any of the foliage added to it, and we're going to go ahead and do that right now. So everywhere that's painted green on my on this level is going to end up with a procedural foliage added to it, and you can kind of see that I have a lot of brown. This is kind of the dirt area. We won't have anything added to that at this point, and although we could use a procedural process similar to what we're going to do for the grass to put in rocks and shrubs and stuff like that along here, I've discovered that sometimes we end up with some kind of weird, because of the angle and the different shape of the terrain, sometimes our collisions kind of get a little funky, and we'll have rocks and shrubs and trees and stuff like that kind of hovering off the ground. So we're just going to stick to the flatter ground for this one, and then we'll use the paint system to paint in stuff along this dirt area here as well. All right, and one other thing to note, anywhere that we have this grass, this green color, is going to have that procedural grass added to it. So like in our river area, we would have had that as well. But, and I've left a little bit of kind of transition right here at the very edge of the water where we'll kind of see, we'll get some shrubbery kind of growing up in here, but anywhere that I painted over it with a different material, in this case I painted the mud into the river here, will not have as much, or we shouldn't have any. It just depends on how thickly you painted this mud over the top of and replaced this grass material, okay? So just keep that in mind, and the way to get rid of it is to paint it a little bit more with the material that you're using. For example, if you're going to paint a path, and we'll probably demonstrate that if I remember towards the end here, but as we paint a path through here, it should remove the grass from that path area because it's not part of the grass material anymore. So if that gets a little confusing, you'll see what I mean as we move along here, okay? So let's go ahead and get started. We'll open up our content drawer, and I've already created a folder called Foliage, and then another one called Grass Types. Okay, so if you remember how to do that, you right-click, create a new folder. Okay, and I'm calling it Foliage, and then Grass Types. All right, and what we're going to do is we're going to use this grass layer system. I'm going to make a new one in here and demonstrate how that works. Okay. But first, you're probably wondering where I got the grass from and the shrubs and things like that. Right now, because these are smaller assets, I'm getting them right here off of Bridge in the 3D plants, okay? And there's all kinds of grass you can use depending on what you wanted your area to look like. There's even some ferns, which, I don't think I have any ferns, so we'll go through this process real quick of how to do this, and maybe I'll add some ferns into there. Make sure I'm signed in. So let me grab this off of here real quick. I'm going to grab, this one's got a bunch of selection of ferns. I'm going to go ahead and just download it again. I have a bunch of other grass that's already downloaded. So as you go through all of that, you can find some grass. All right. It seems okay. It exported good. And when you export, it'll do something like this. And I kind of like having a separate content browser for when I'm working with this, so that I can start bringing things in. Okay. And as you can see, it's in my 3D plant section here. Also, while I'm in here, I've downloaded some small rocks and some other larger rocks for future. But those would be our 3D assets. And then things like this rounded cobble rock. It's kind of a smaller rock. And a sandstone rock. It's a little bit larger. Okay. So, and this one I probably won't use for painting because it's a little bit too big. Or I won't use for the procedural part. I want to be able to control how many I put into the scene, and procedural just kind of dumps it all in there. All right, and there's a few other rocks and stuff that you can find, but some smaller kind of rocks would help, and maybe some little sticks or something if you want to throw those in as well. And we're going to put all of those into our procedural, so it doesn't just have to be plants, okay? So let's go ahead and jump back in. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to right-click in here, okay? And we're going to go to foliage right here, and we're going to get a landscape grass type, okay, right here. And that's what this is, okay? Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and call it LG underscore like I did these other ones. And I'm going to call this one grass, not grass X, Aspen, because this is going to go into my Aspen scene. Aspen, Colorado again. So now I've got that created. I'm going to go ahead and double click on it and open it. And it should look like this when you open it up. There's not much here. And what we're going to do is we're going to add in these elements right here, okay? So I'm going to hit the little plus symbol, and that's going to give me my first index, which is going to be index 0, because remember, when we're working with arrays, we start at 0 and go and count up from there. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, okay? So if you have 6 elements, you're going to actually have 0 through 5, for example. And you can put in quite a few of these particular things. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is I want to find a grass mesh, and I'm actually going to use grass. So I'm going to go into my Megascans again, and you can also download various assets from the asset store and things like that. And if you find something you really like out there, like Turbo Squid, you can download those as well. Okay, so let's go ahead and start with some wild grass, okay? So I'm going to grab, and you can see they haven't all built up here, but we're going to go ahead and if we take a look, and then we have a static mesh, okay? This right here is a static mesh, as we can see the underscore right there, okay? Now, we could do this a couple ways. We can find the one that we want, for example, this one right here, and I can hit this little arrow, and it'll automatically populate into there. You can also click and drag and drop. We can also hit the down arrow and find various things in here. I don't know why it's not refreshing these so you can see what they actually look like. But anyway, okay, so this is our first one. And right now it's going to do a grass density of 400. That's quite a lot, but I think because it's grass, I'll leave it at that for right now. We're going to use the grid. Culling distances, this I'll show you once we get into it. And I'm just going to put this one in here. We're going to finish building everything out to make this work so that you can kind of get a visual of what's happening, and you can start making adjustments as you're going back and forth, okay? So min LOD is -1. We're not going to worry about that. We have a scaling. Right now it's all uniform, so every single one of these will come out exactly the same. I'm going to go ahead and select free for this. And so my X scale, so this is going to be the width of the grass. I'm going to go something like 0.5 and 1.25. And then for the Y, 0.5 and 1.25. And we'll see how this kind of looks. You kind of got to play with these sometimes. Sometimes it looks great, sometimes not so much. All right, so we're going to leave that. We're going to leave it at random rotation. We're not going to actually... Yeah, because we're mostly going to be painting this flat and the way grass grows, we're going to go ahead and leave this one, I think right now, aligned to surface. We'll take a look and see what that looks like, and we can always undo that. We're not going to receive decals on this. Because there's so many of these that are going to get painted and they're small, I'm not going to cast any dynamic shadows, but we'll let it cast contact shadows, I think. We'll see what that looks like. All right, so let's go ahead and hit save on this. All right, so we've got our first one done. Now we actually got to make it so that we can put it in the scene. So if we go back into our content drawer and we go up to our content, we find our materials. And what we want is we want our master material, and we want to find our master material that we use to create our scene out here. Not the material instance, we want the actual master material. Okay, so with the master material, it should look like this. We have our layer blends with it. All right. Okay, so I'm going to go back into my master material here, and not going to click on that. What we're going to do is we're going to right click and we're going to type in landscape. I don't know why it doesn't come up when you just type in grass, but we're going to type in landscape and we're going to pull up a landscape grass output. Okay, and it should look like this right here. All right. And with that selected, what we're going to do is we're going to come over here to the details button. I'm going to hit the down arrow. And we're going to find our grass. So it should be, we named it LG underscore, okay? And this one was my grass aspen, okay? So I'm going to select that one, and now it should populate, and it should look like that, okay? Okay, now that we have that in our scene, the next thing we need to do is we need to make it so that we can actually put this into our actual scene, okay? And so what we're going to do is we're going to right click again, and we're going to type in landscape again, okay? And what we want is a landscape layer sample, okay? And we're going to give this a name. We're going to call this grass. So this name has to actually be the exact name of what our material that we want to put it against, okay? So in other words, if I go back to my master here and I take a look, I have this layer called grass right here, okay? And it's my layer grass. So we want it to sample this layer right here, okay? So we're going to go ahead and call this grass. Now, if you named it something else in the area that you want this to actually get painted on, you need to tell it that exact name, okay? This is grass layer, so that's the layer that we're going to sample. And now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to select and connect this together, okay? All right, and then I'm going to go ahead and save this. Okay, and now if I go back to my scene, you should see that I have all of this grass. And you can see right here where let me turn this camera down a little bit. Okay, how about more like around 2 or 3. All right, so you can see that here in my water, I have grass growing as well. Okay, and that's kind of that transition point. I might come back and play around with this a little bit more to make it look a little bit more natural. But overall, this is the grass that we have in the scene now. And this is just the very first piece of it. And if you just wanted that grass, then, well, you're done. But let's go ahead and I'm going to show you a couple other little things about putting rocks in and the actual tool itself. And then we'll move on to painting, okay? Because this layer right here, you can put in many different arrays, okay? So, and 400 may not have been enough. Maybe you want the grass to be more thick across your plain open areas like this, okay? So you could always go in and right here, you know, we could bump this up quite a bit. All right, and now I've got a lot more grass, okay? And let me see if I can find an area over here on the side. Let's bump this camera back up. You can see some grass growing over here. And this is where we can talk about whether we want it to be, all right. Jump that back down. Whether we want the grass to be aligned to the surface or whether we want it to not be aligned. And in this case, because the grass is so small, kind of going up at a small angle like this probably isn't a big deal because you can see how as it grows up here, it's kind of going at an angle like this. if we were to go in back into here and we were to not have it aligned to surface, all right, now we can see that the grass is growing more up and down. Okay, but when we do that, you can see that because of the way the grass is in the width, that it kind of hovers off the ground a little bit. So that's one reason why I don't really like doing that with grass so much, because it's kind of obvious. So let me go ahead and go back in and change that back to align to surface. All right. But if we were to add something in, like I'm going to go ahead and put that index back up now. I'm going to add another index. And so let's go ahead and I'm going to play around with the ferns a little bit. All right. So let me pull up my content browser again. Okay. And I have this, let's see here, go to 3D plants. Let's see here, find my ferns. Lady ferns, okay. So we can see all the different ferns I have in here, and I am probably just going to go with something a little larger so we can kind of see this. And again, each of these models you download, there's multiple different types of that plant, and putting them here in this arrays are going to give you a variation in the different grasses and the different plants and things like that that you might want to put in. All right, so we're going to go ahead and do that. I'll leave the density, I think I'll drop the density down to something like 100. And, oh yeah, let's talk about the cold instance here in a minute. Let me not forget that. All right, so this one, again, I'm going to go ahead and go with free. I'm going to do something similar. I did last time. Again, every time you do this, you have to kind of see what it looks like. So being able to have it hooked up and go back in and see how it looks is kind of important. I'm going to leave it on align to surface for right now. We're not going to do decals. I am going to cast shadows on these, so I may want to drop this number down. And you're going to see that it's going to possibly affect my frames per second with the number of shadows as well. So let's go ahead and save this. All right. And I'm going to go back in, and now I have ferns. Okay. And the ferns are aligned to the surface area, and let's see if that looks kind of funny or not. Back away a little bit. Okay, wow, there's a lot of them. Probably don't need that many. All right. And the ferns may actually be something I want to put with my trees and use as part of my paint system, but just to kind of demonstrate how it looks. So they are kind of growing up at an angle. This isn't a severe angle because it's fairly flat along here. But if you didn't want that, this would probably be a plant that might work okay with this. Let's go ahead and take a look. So if we were to not align the surface, and let's go ahead and save it. All right, now we can see that they're standing straight up, growing upwards like a plant probably would do, as opposed to being down on the ground. But we have a little bit of that same problem happening here, and it looks like I'm having some of that problems with some of the grass anyway. Ooh, okay, that's unexpected. Let's go ahead and talk about this real quick. So we need to rebuild our grass maps, and our physical material material needs to be rebuilt. So let's go ahead and do that real quick. We're going to go up here. I'm going to go just build all landscapes right here. Okay, let it go through that. And now let's see here. Let's see here. There we go. Okay. All right, so let's hit play again, see if everything shows back up. All right, there we go. All right, and it actually kind of cleaned up everything too, so that's good. Okay, so now, yeah, it's not looking so bad. And it looks like the grass is no longer hovering off the ground. All right, that's good. Okay, so every once in a while you'll need to rebuild just to kind of see how it looks. I still think that's way too many ferns, and it may not even be something I want in there, so I may change it with something else. But there's how you can get plants in there. And then one more thing, let's go ahead and I'll show you a rock real quick, and then we'll talk about this culling distance, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and leave the ferns in there for now, but I'm going to drop them down to something more like maybe 10. Okay, save that. Put that index up, and I'm going to go ahead and hit the plus again. And this time I'm going to go back into my mega scans. I'm going to find my 3D assets. I'm going to find that little rounded cobblestone, and I'm going to select it. Drop this down to something like 10 probably. And I am going to leave shadows on this one too, because rocks without shadows are kind of funny looking. This is something you can change as well. I'm just going to do a real simple. You can of course make it bigger as well, but just to real quick get through this, I'm going to do that. We're going to align it to the surface because rocks need to sit on the surface. They don't grow straight up. We're not going to receive decals on this one, and I'm going to leave shadows. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and save it. And that's how you put rocks in and things like that. So if I go back into here, let's see here. I may have done too few, but oh, there's one. So right there, there's a little bit of a rock. You can see that it's been stretched a little bit because of the numbers that we changed on it. But now we've got some rocks added into our scene. There's a bigger one over here. 10 may have been too few, but you can kind of see how it works. We got one growing up over there. Okay, so culling distance. So let's talk about that real quick. Let me change my camera speed back up. That'll work. All right, so basically it's the distance that it'll start to appear. And as you get further away, oh, well, there's also one other thing we need to talk about. So as you get further away from it, there won't be any grass or rocks. So this is how it manages to basically instantiates those models the closer you get to it. And you can kind of play around with that until you get the look that you want. And not every particular piece of foliage needs to have the same culling distance, for example. If it's a larger plant that can be seen from further away, then yes, you may want to have the culling distance extended a little bit further. But if it's a smaller piece like grass, you may not. But then again, if you can see like you're running up towards the edge of a mountain, there should be like, rolling hills of grass, and you're rolling up to it and you can see that there's no grass, and then all of a sudden it pops into view. It kind of looks unnatural, right? So you may want to change your culling distance. And as I run over here towards the kind of hill over here where I have some grass that should be growing up on the hill, you can kind of see that effect. But this isn't quite so bad. It looks like it's working pretty well for this landscape the way it is at default. Not every landscape will be the same, of course. So you may need to adjust that. And again, that's right here, changing your start and end culling distances, okay? And you may want it to have a shorter culling distance so that instead of being at 1,000 away from you, you may want it to be like 500. But if you can see it from further away, you want to extend the distance so that it takes longer, so that it's visible further away, okay? So, and it's kind of hard to see that in my scene, but that would be something you can obviously see in your own. The other thing I want to talk about is each of these models, okay? I think I've already done it for the rock, but for the ferns, I know I have not. So if we double click on the static mesh for the models that you decide to put in, it'll bring it up into the scene here for you to change. Basically, this is the base model. This is the actual static mesh itself that's in the memory of the game. Over here on the right-hand side, you probably will want to enable Nanite support, and you're going to want to preserve area for these, okay? And especially since we're going to have so many of them into the scene. And then you hit apply changes. And what that does is, you know what, I should probably have. So if we take a look here in the, I'm going to undo what I just did, hopefully. And Nanite is enabled. Let's go ahead and unenable it. Apply these changes. All right, so up here we're at LOD 0. If you take a look, right? And if I come back further on it, you can see that the LOD up here changes. Okay, we're all the way at 5 now. And as I move closer and closer and closer, some of the LODs look pretty good on some of these models. One of the ones I really don't like are some of the grass models because it turns into these kind of X card stacks, right? They're little cards that look like the general shape, but the LOD turns on too soon, and you start seeing these kind of weird X-looking effects. And if I move this out of the way and show you here in this scene I made a while back, you can kind of see that. See this grass up here on the hill? It's really, this is the LOD 5. It's turned into these cards, and it's not that far away from my character, so you can kind of see it as you run around. You can, of course, adjust the LOD distances, but with Nanite now being available in 5.1, basically it handles it differently in the processing, and when we enable it, we've got Nanite enabled now, okay, it will, let's go ahead and save everything. All right, when I jump back in, now it will show that model as long as, it'll show it in its LOD 0 version from long ways, and it looks more natural, okay, especially with the grass. This grass, I believe I've already, because I've used it, let me double check. I think I already turned it into Nanite. I did, and I did not preserve the area. But if I were to unenable it, apply the changes, go back into my scene, you can kind of see what I'm talking about. See how this completely changes everything. And that's another thing to consider about how you're going to do your culling distance and also adjusting your LODs. But it completely changes the way the scene looks, okay? And if we take a look at my frames per second, right now I'm running about 50 looking in this direction. So if I go back to my grass and I enable, and we do want to preserve area, we're going to go ahead and apply changes, save it, go back in. I really didn't affect my frames per second, but my level of detail has increased significantly because of Nanite. So something to think about when you're also setting this up. All right, so I think I have talked enough about the basic process of getting procedural grass into your scene. And it's not just grass, it's a bunch of the little models that you want to have applied into your scene. And as you can see, it continues to spread out as we move along, okay? So that is everything that covers onto here. If I go into my selection mode and go to my landscape, I go to paint, and I want to paint in a path. Okay, let me shrink that down a little bit. So if I start painting into a path, it'll pop in for a second like that, and I'll paint this in. Let's see here, this brush strength, let's go ahead and get the strength up a little bit. There we go. And the longer you paint it, the thinner and thinner the grass starts to get. You can see that now. And eventually you can work a path into your scene. Okay, I'm not going to go do much more than that for this. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at the foliage painting system. Okay, now that we've got our system set up for doing our procedural, let's go ahead and paint some trees and some other things into our scene as well. Okay, so let's go up here to our landscape mode, and we're going to go to foliage. Okay, and you can see when I brought those ferns in, it automatically populated them into here for me for whatever reason, probably because I had it open at the time. But we can put other things in here as well. Okay, you can, if you wanted to paint some of these little rocks in or some of the bigger rocks. Okay, so if I went and found that sandstone rock, I can grab this in. Now, notice the difference here. This is actually a instance, okay? This is a static mesh foliage. This should be an instance, okay? So we're going to go ahead and I can drop that in there just the same, all right? So now I should have a rock in here. Did it not go in? Oh, there we go. Helps to put it in the spot where it says to put it. All right, so we have the rock in there. What about trees? So let's go ahead and find some trees. Again, there are websites out there that you can find trees. They also have in Bridge some trees, and actually it's a download you'd have to do. So it's on the marketplace in Epic. Okay, and if we go to the marketplace, come on. Okay, oh, there we go. All right, so if we go to the marketplace and we just type in trees. Okay, there are all kinds of trees. Of course, people are selling them, and there are also some free ones. This is the Mega Scan one I'm talking about. These are kind of like regular European style, leafy trees, not pine trees. And there are a bunch of other things as well. There's this procedural biome, bunch of other style trees. We have these flatwoods brush. I think this is the Florida area. So you can kind of find any type you want. And then also in some of the sets, like this one right here, the city park environment, there's trees in here. There's this Landscape Pro 2.0. This is the one I have downloaded along with those European hornbeams. I've downloaded and put that one in here. If you're making more of a kind of a deserty, arid type place, there's also this one for Australia. And there's this city park environment, as I said, where you can add them to your add them into your game as an asset, and then you can just pick and choose the assets you want to use. And let me show you that here. All right, so you can see I have a few things in here. Here's the European hornbeam. Those are trees that I would put in. I'll probably, if I use any of them, I'll put some of them in individually. There are a bunch of other stuff that is available too, and you can see I've got a few different kits that I put in here for different things I'm playing around with. And I'm trying to remember. I thought I put it in here. Is it this one? Yes. So this is the Landscape Pro Pack 03. It's called STF when you put it in here, and that's this one right here. Okay, I downloaded that one and put it into this pack. So I have some pine trees. Now, if you're not making a scene with pine trees, you're just making it arid, yours may be different. But again, it starts off as this STF, okay? And this is the Landscape Pro one right here. And then inside here, there's some base maps that you can take a look at, see how they use them. You have your environment and you have your base, okay? So they have some grass available in here. Looks like they've already got some grass layers created, so you could just pull those right in and do. So basically, this should look like very familiar to what we just did right here. Okay, pull that in and then put the sample on it. Okay, but I am looking for. Okay, those material functions. Did it not make it in here? Maybe it's under environment. There it is. Under environment, there's some procedural foliage, okay, that we can use, that you can use to put into here, or you can set them up in the procedural foliage that I showed you. And these are all static mesh foliages, though. Yeah, they should work. And then it'll convert them for you. And then there's also different ones in here. And I'm going to go for pine trees. And there's different folders for different size pines, different types. I'm not going to get into all of them. I'll just grab one or two. So now what I want to do is I want to take this one and I'm going to drag and drop it into there. And I'm going to go back up, go into here, do the same thing with this one. Okay. And maybe one more. I'll grab a small one. Oh, I grabbed the wrong one. But see, if you grab the wrong one or they don't have it available, it'll convert it for you. You can just go ahead and say save. Now it's made an additional one, even though there's already one in here. And yeah, so there we go. All right, so now we've got our different things that we might want to paint in here, right? I'm going to just concentrate on these. So if I put little check marks in them, that'll make it so they can be painted. So I can just kind of paint them in there like that. And wow, that's a ton of rocks. Okay. So we're going to undo that. You can also hold the shift button and unpaint things, or you can go up here and erase. Okay, so under the foliage mode in paint, okay, that's how you paint. And then you can do erase and you can do remove and things like that. So what we're going to do first, since there are so many rocks, I'm going to go into the rocks. I'm going to select it. Okay, and by selecting it, we have a lot of those same things that you saw already. It looks like they've already kind of played around with the scaling for it. They made it free, or if they didn't, you can do the same thing, select free. But this is where we're getting into trouble here. There's like 10,000 of these being painted. Is it 10? It's 100,000. 100,000 of them being painted. Don't need that many. So let's do like 3, okay? I'll drop that down. Again, you've got all the different settings for how it's going to be placed. You can align it to the normal, so whichever direction up is. You can do an average normal, so it'll kind of pick it. You can adjust the height area to where it will be painted. So if you don't want it to be painted above a certain height as you're painting on your landscape, you can change these numbers to minimum and max. You can also change the max angle that it'll grow at, so or be placed. Because if it's like at 90 degrees or above 45 degrees, perhaps a tree won't grow there or a rock won't be sitting there. There are other things you can play around with, shadows, so all the same stuff. There's even options for setting up collision, okay? And these rocks don't have any collision, and I'll probably leave them that way because a lot of rocks would cause interference. But with my trees, I would want to have collision. So let's go ahead and go in. I'm going to select one of these trees, okay? And you can see, yeah, this one, I didn't do anything to it. So this is how they have it set as default. It's set up as 3 for the density. And looks like they've got it set to 45. If you change that number, you don't want it growing on a certain hill, you can change your angles again. And right now it does have block all set up for the collision. If you don't want it to block, you can obviously go in and change your collision settings, okay? And yeah, so I'm going to just leave this one as default because it didn't look so bad. Now if I paint again, okay, still kind of a lot of rocks, but you can kind of get the idea, all right? And you don't have to. So if you don't want, you can put a few rocks in and you can go in and you can uncheck it and say, no, okay, we're not going to put some rocks in for a while. And then, you know, go back in. You want some ferns maybe added to this one, maybe this fern right here. And again, probably want to see what it's set at. Probably don't want that many. And it's set to uniform scale. Maybe we want to change it, maybe we don't. We'll just leave it alone for right now, but you know how to change it. So I can paint in some here, and maybe I'll get some ferns growing in and along there. So not too bad, okay? And again, the same with these. If we select it here and double click, we can go ahead and go in and we can enable Nanite, so we can get rid of the LOD, okay? We're gonna go ahead and apply those changes. So again, enable Nanite, okay? And same with my trees. Probably want to go ahead and get that set up. Because trees from a long distance, they'll also have a card system. Sometimes they look good, sometimes not so much. Just depends on your scene. Okay, and it's going to take a second to update. All right, so now I'll leave those other two the way they are, and if we back off a little bit and we start to look at kind of how it looks from a distance, not quite like that. Okay, I don't know how far we have to get, but anyway, doesn't look too bad. But I think the ones that we set up for Nanite, you can tell look a little bit more like trees. If we go in to this one, they didn't really show it to you. And I back off from here, LOD2, 3, and there's going to be a point where it's going to kind of turn into a card looking thing like that right there. All right, but now if we go ahead and activate Nanite, okay, it takes back on its tree shape again, looks a little bit more natural, okay, and I'll go ahead and save that. So, yeah. from a distance, it looks pretty decent. All right, and again, the rock, probably the same thing. I don't think I enabled Nanite on this one. Not that you're going to see it from a great distance, usually because of the size of it. All right, so that is the painting system and setting up procedural grass and such. So now you can kind of play around with getting your different assets from those different packs and starting to bring in more detail into your area. You can start thinking about where you want to have your paths and things like that to go through. And let me go ahead and save all this real quick. All right, so that is that. So let's go ahead and take a look at what we'll probably do next time, just to kind of, in the next couple of videos, we will be talking about how to use the spline system to put in things like roads. Okay, you can also use them to put in paths, but since we're going to be needing to paint them out anyway, because if you use a spline system, it's just going to drop it right down over the top of whatever grass and things like that you have. So you'll have shrubs and trees and grass growing through it. And since we're using a painting system, a layered blend system, you can paint them out. So if you're just going to paint in a path, just paint it in. It's probably just as easy as doing the spline system. And then, yeah, so we're going to go ahead and do that. And we'll probably also start talking about importing models and getting our scene area set up. All right, so that's it for this tutorial. Hopefully you got everything out of it you need. If you have any questions, again, put them down in the comments section. Ask me questions, and I will be more than happy to help you out. Again, if you like the video, please like it, and then subscribe to my channel. And I will see you all next time.